I'm going to call this meeting of the Plan Commission to order. Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Ash?
Here.
Ms. Bindum?
Here.
Mr. Fell?
Here.
Mr. Fitch?
Here.
Mr. Hopkins? Mr. Otto? Ms. Stake?
Here.
Ms. Zubaban?
We do have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda? No. The minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Mr. Fell.
Second.
Second by Mr. Ash. Are there any changes to the minutes? Apparently not. All in favor of approving the minutes? Say
Aye.
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 Those opposed? The minutes are approved. Do we have any communications? We don't have any continued public hearings. We don't have any old business. So we will now open a new public hearing on Plan Case 2215 M13 and Annexation Number 2013A02, a request by First Federal Savings Bank of Champaign to rezone a .36 acre tract at 2110 North Willow Road from Champaign County R1 to City B1 neighborhood business as part of an annexation agreement. Now, I just briefly, here's the process that will follow tonight, and then we'll have a staff presentation. I've opened the public hearing. Staff is going to present a summary of the case. Petitioner can address us and outline the request and present evidence. Other proponents can weigh in. Opponents may present evidence and may ask questions through me to the petitioner if they're materially interested in the case. Others may be heard. Staff may make additional comments. At the end, the petitioner will have a chance to rebut and summarize his position, and then we'll close the public hearing. The Plan Commission will discuss, possibly vote. So, Ms. Bird.
Great, thank you. I'll go over things a little in more detail than I perhaps would, because we do have a new commissioner tonight. First meeting. So I'll go into a bit more detail and explain the process a little bit more. So this is an annexation agreement. The annexation agreement is considered by the City Council, and as part of the annexation agreement, there is a proposed rezoning if the property is annexed into the city, and so that's why this is coming before this body to consider the rezoning aspect of it, not the actual annexation agreement itself, but the rezoning. So the property is currently in the county. If you look in your Exhibit A, location and existing land use map is in your packet. It's also up on the screen. So here we have the subject property, which is 2110 North Willow Road. So that is located adjacent to the interstate. It's located at the end of a tract of residential houses, single-family houses that are in the county. You can see here this red line is the corporate boundaries of Urbana. So this is all in the city of Urbana, and in here, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, hopefully you can. This is all in the county. So this is, it's currently zoned in the county as R1, and a straight conversion to city zoning would R1 in the county would come in as R1 in the city. So R1 is single family residential, and the applicants are proposing that this be rezoned to a commercial zoning district. If you look at its location, although it is part of a residential development, it's located in an area with other commercial development, and so the applicant has stated that they think it's more viable a property as with a commercial zoning attached. So they are requesting that the annexation agreement include a clause that would rezone the property to City B1 neighborhood business upon annexation. The applicant is First Federal Savings Bank of Champaign-Urbana, and they have requested the annexation agreement. They acquired the property through foreclosure. They can explain more about that, I'm sure. They're here this evening. In 2012, and they have been trying to sell the property since then. They are saying that it's not viable as, with the residential zoning that it has, and so they would like it, to offer it as commercial. They don't intend to demolish the house on the property. They simply want to be able to market it as having a potential for commercial development when it sells. So it is adjacent to an interstate highway, a popular restaurant, and a large church. And then across the interstate is more commercial development. Michelle's Bridal Shop is to the north. So to the east is the Cracker Barrel, to the west is Faith Community Church, and then to the south is a residential development. An additional constraint on the lot is its configuration. So it does have 2 front yards, although that's really one frontage. That does mean that there are 2 front yards, and that does constrain the property and make the property less desirable for the privacy that's often desirable in a single-family residential home. So the proposed annexation agreement would require the city to rezone the property from County R1 single-family residence to City B1 neighborhood business to grant a conditional use permit which would allow single-family residential use of the property to continue as a legally conforming use. So in the B1 zoning district, the neighborhood business, single-family residential is not allowed by right. It's allowed with a conditional use permit. And so this annexation agreement would grant a conditional use permit to allow it to continue as a single-family residence so that it would be a legally conforming use, which would mean that it could be improved, it could be rebuilt if it needed to be rebuilt, if fire, for example, damaged it, and so on. So the Plan Commission is requested this evening to recommend to the City Council whether to rezone the property from County R1 to City B1 as part of the annexation agreement. And the annexation agreement, along with a hearing on the agreement, will go forward to the City Council. I'm sorry, I don't actually have the date in front of me, not this upcoming Monday, but the following one. I'll check the date and get back to you on that. Benefits of the annexation agreement, of bringing the subject property into the city. The property is contiguous, as we can see from our map here. It is contiguous to the city in 3 directions and therefore could be annexed. So if the annexation agreement was approved, the petitioner has stated that they would bring forth a petition to annex into the city. Let's see. So the proposed rezoning, the current zoning is County R1 single-family residential, and with a conversion to City B1 neighborhood business. The neighborhood business district is intended to provide commercial areas of limited size for basic trade and personal services for the convenience of adjacent residential areas for needs recurring regularly or frequently. So it was a staff recommendation that the applicant request B1 neighborhood business so that it would have the least impact on the single-family residential development to the south. So it does allow commercial development, low-impact commercial development, limited scope, so fewer intensive uses on the lot, which would then have less of an impact on that residence to the south. The subject property was platted in 1956 as part of that residential development. It was built in the county. The petitioner can explain more about their reasons, their justification for it. They can explain more about the current conditions. They have said that the property is in need of a complete upgrade, including a new roof, new bathrooms, a kitchen remodel, in order to be viable as a single-family residence. And as I understand it, the price that, or the amount that they lost in the foreclosure, they are unable to recoup that in selling this as a single-family residence, which is why they are requesting this annexation agreement with the rezoning as part of it. So the B1 Neighborhood Business District, in your packet there is a description sheet of the B1 district that does go through all of the different uses that would be allowed by right. And they include a limited number of retail, personal services, food sales and services, and public uses, and also professional and business offices, which is what the applicant has said they would envision on this lot. So as I said earlier, the agreement does grant a conditional use permit, which would allow the residence that's on the property now to continue to remain on the property as a legally conforming use. So it would not be creating a non-conforming lot. So if we look at the surrounding land uses and zoning and future land use, the site, as I've said, is currently single-family residential. That is its zoning, that is also its use. And the comprehensive plan does identify it as residential. Because that area is already built out, the comprehensive plan identified it as being what it currently is. The comprehensive plan did not anticipate that there would be a need to change that area. To the north is zoning district is B3, so that's across the interstate up at Michelle's Bridal. And that is in the comprehensive plan, that is regional business, which Michelle's Bridal certainly is. To the south is single-family residential, both in zoning and in land use and in the comprehensive plan. To the east is general business, B3, and that is the Cracker Barrel restaurant, and that is the future land use is regional business. And then to the west is the zoning is R1, single-family residential in the city, and that is the church use, the institutional use. The future land use identifies that property as residential as well. So here is the zoning map. So here's the subject property. The properties in red, that is the B3 General Business District. These properties here, the color is very bad on this computer here, but you can see it better on that screen behind us here. The yellow properties, those are single-family residential, and then the light gray up here is light industrial, that's IN1. And here's the future land use map. So this is taken from the comprehensive plan, and up here, right here in this red circle, I don't know if you can see that very well, but that is the subject property. So regional business, that's the entire area along that frontage road, along the interstate, and behind it. And then this is a large swath of residential development that is existing other than the church, which churches are often in residential zoning districts. So there's some information about the tax impact on the city. That's something that we always want to consider when we are talking about annexations. And currently, the taxable value of the property is $45,390. If the city were to annex the property and it continued to have a single-family residence on it, and the residence was not increased in value, if they did a significant upgrade, that would mean that the value would increase and therefore the property tax would increase. But if it were to remain as it is, the city would receive $615 per year in tax revenue from the property. The school district would receive $2,248, and the park district would receive $459. Those are the major bodies that would be impacted by this. If the property were to be redeveloped with a small office building, there are so many variables, but I did give an example of a new, relatively new office building on the Patel Law Firm at 108 West University Avenue. That's the corner of University and Broadway or Race? Broadway. So that building was built in 2010, and it's got a taxable value of $141,890, and which results in $1,923 in annual tax revenue for the city, $7,029 for the school district, and $1,435 for the park district. So it's a significant difference, but that property is in a perhaps very differently valued location And we don't know, of course, what size the building would be, whether it would be similar materials, and therefore what the value would be. But that's just to give you an idea.
If I may, while she's on that point, may I ask a question?
Sure.
To that point,
Mr. Ash.
you do see it then still being greater than $649, as it is with the residents now, though?
Yes.
Okay, very
I think that's something that I asked our economic development people, whether or not it would necessarily increase if there were commercial development on it, an office building or something. And I think there definitely would be an increase. It would be hard for there not to be an increase. Next to impossible, really. So then we go to the LaSalle criteria. These are the legal criteria established in the state of Illinois that we use to evaluate a rezoning. So the first one is the existing land uses and zoning of nearby property. So that's looking at the land uses of the subject property and the surrounding, and then what is the zoning. So is there a significant impact with continuing the current zoning and compared to with the proposed zoning district? So on this one, the subject property, the zoning, and the use are consistent with the current zoning. The proposed zoning district would be consistent with the commercial uses to the north and to the east, would also be compatible with the institutional use to the west, and because it is the neighborhood business zoning district, it can also be compatible with the residential properties to the south. So the neighborhood business district, the idea is that that's meant to be able to fit into a residential neighborhood to serve those residences. So that would not be inconsistent or should not be inconsistent. The property to the south, because it does contain a single-family residence, there would be, if there were any commercial development on this lot, it would require screening between that property to the south and the subject property if it were to develop commercially. That's a zoning regulation between commercial and residential property, so that would also help protect that property to the south. So the specific provisions, the annexation agreement includes provisions to protect the residential property to the south, specifically requiring a minimum setback of at least 10 feet, a landscape buffer with a minimum depth of 5 feet, and a solid 6-foot-high wood or masonry fence. So that would be in between that residential property to the south and any commercial development. The second criteria, the extent to which property values are diminished by the restrictions of the ordinance. So that's really the difference in value of the property as R1 single-family residential and the value it would have if it were rezoned. I think that it's likely that the property would be more valuable if it were rezoned for a commercial zoning district. Due to its location, it has great visibility from the interstate. It also has, that it's a very popular restaurant adjacent to it that people are coming to, so it does have really good visibility. And it is not an ideal residential lot. It was developed that way, it was created that way, but it's not ideal for residential development. So I think it's safe to say that it would increase in value. The third and fourth criteria are about the current zoning restrictions. So do the current zoning restrictions promote the public welfare in some significant way that would offset any hardship imposed on the property owner by the restrictions? So the current zoning restrictions, they do protect that property directly to the south. I don't know that they protect the property to the west, although it's a residential zoning district, it's an institutional use. And I don't think that a B1, what would be allowed in a B1 zoning district would have a negative impact on that institutional use. But there could be an impact on that house to the south. It would be mitigated by the fact that it's a B1 zoning district, it's neighborhood business, which means that the businesses are meant to be compatible with a residential neighborhood, and also with the additional requirement of screening in the annexation agreement. Should the rezoning be denied, there really wouldn't be a gain to the public. There would not be, with those additional screening regulations, there should not be a serious impact on those properties to the south, and so therefore there wouldn't be a relative gain. Number 5, the suitability of the subject property for the zoned purposes. So this is really, if you look at the location of this property, when we had when this first came to us and we had staff discussions about this, we, our first reaction was, well, this was built as a residential area. Why can't it continue as a residential area? And then our economic development team looked at it and said, well, wait a minute, look at where it is and look at what the property would you want to live right on that corner with, the interstate. Your house is literally facing the interstate. You've got a restaurant on one side, a big church on the other side. Maybe it's not as viable today as when it was built and it was a new house. So I think that, due to the property's location adjacent to an interstate, a restaurant, a church, and the fact that it is in close proximity to a residential neighborhood, it does make sense that a neighborhood commercial zoning district does make sense in that location. The last criteria is the length of time the property has been vacant as zoned. The applicant can speak more directly to this, but as I understand it, the property has been vacant since the bank acquired it through foreclosure, which was last year. So I believe it's been vacant for about a year and a half. And they have been marketing it. I don't know if they've been marketing it actively that entire time, but I know that it has been on the market. So you have in your packet a summary of findings, and then your options this evening are to approve or to recommend approval of the proposed annexation agreement, including a zoning designation of B1 neighborhood business for the subject property and a conditional use permit to allow single-family residential use of the property to continue as a legally conforming use upon annexation, or to recommend approval subject to certain conditions or recommended changes, that if you did want those recommended changes, the applicant who's here this evening would have to agree to those, or to deny or recommend denial of the proposed annexation agreement. And in this case, the staff recommendation for the Plan Commission is to recommend approval of the proposed annexation agreement as presented. I know that the applicant is here this evening. I believe that there are also some neighbors that are here. We have quite a few people in the audience, so they may have some additional comments for you this evening. But I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Ms. Bird? Mr. Fell?
I doubt this would happen, but in the event the house burned down or somebody wanted to remodel it, do they have to conform to the R1 zoning regulations or the B1 zoning regulations? For instance, there's a different open space ratio setbacks.
So if the property were to be rezoned, they would have to follow the B1 zoning district.
But you could still build a residential, you could still
would
build a
have a
house
conditional-
with
right.
B1
Yes,
requirements.
because it would have a conditional use permit
Okay.
attached to it, so yes.
Any other questions? I've got a couple. Trying to understand, first of all, where the fence is going to be located. There's a driveway that's really close, looks like, to the property line. And I assume that the fence has to be 10 feet inside the property line. Do you know approximately how far the lot line is from the driveway and how much room that'll leave? In other words, will the fence actually be located 12 feet from that driveway or 15 feet from that driveway?
So we were actually anticipating that the, so there would be a setback of 10 feet, a landscape buffer with a minimum depth of 5 feet, and a solid 6-foot-high wood or masonry fence. So that fence could go on the property line or just on their side of the property line. Then the landscape buffer, and there's still then a 10-foot setback to building, for the building line.
Okay, so the fence can go on the property line.
Yes. The fence is not, so the setback is about the building. It's a building setback.
Okay?
So, and the reason, it sounds kind of counterintuitive that you would have the fence on the property line and then the landscape buffer as opposed to the other way around. But the reason for that is, our zoning ordinance does often call for a fence and then a landscape buffer. And if you have the fence on the inside of the landscape buffer that you have to provide, and then you have a fence, you don't generally maintain outside your fence. And so this was actually to provide more protection for the single-family residents to the south, so that there's a fence, and they have, that single-family residence has everything on their side of it, that's their property. And then, but there's still a landscape buffer that would provide, some sound mitigation and a further setback of, it would mean that nothing else, there couldn't be any parking spaces in that, there couldn't be any, there wouldn't be a patio in that because there is that landscape buffer. Does that make sense?
It does. The concern I would have is if it's too close to the driveway to get an RV in there or, some such.
So it
I don't know
would-
I don't know where the lot line is.
It would have to be on their side of the lot, on their
Sure.
property line.
Sure.
I don't know, I actually don't know either. Generally, there is somewhat of a setback from driveways, but not always. For example, my house is, the driveway's right on the property line, and my neighbor put up a fence, and we've knocked a few rear view mirrors off.
Yeah, that's what I would be worried about.
Yeah.
The other thing is this is a strangely shaped lot, and then looking at the setbacks, I'm figuring out which is the side and which is the rear and which is the front. So is the front on Willow?
So there would be this and this would be fronts.
Two fronts.
Right, so there would be two fronts. It depends which way the building faces, which you would consider the rear and which you would consider the side. So you would actually have to see a site plan to be able to figure that out.
Okay.
Um,
And this goes to a related point that's a little bit esoteric, and I don't know what to do about it, and I don't think you can answer it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I'm looking at the setbacks in B1, and there's a note that in the B1, if a building height is 2 stories or exceeds 25 feet, the minimum side and rear yards shall be increased. Right now, the side yard is 7 and the rear yard is 10. Is it possible that, depending on how the building is, any new building is located, that the required setback could exceed the 10 feet that is specified in the annexation agreement?
Yes, yeah. So if they are proposing a higher building, then that more specific increased setback would apply.
And it would override the 10 feet that's in the annexation
Yes.
agreement?
Yeah, so generally, in the zoning ordinance, whenever there's something more specific to a situation, that trumps the more general regulation. So the stricter and the more specific regulations are what, when there are two regulations that are slightly different and competing, the ones that are stricter and more specific are the ones that apply.
That's good to know. Do you think, is it worth noting that in the annexation agreement, that the greater of 10 feet or whatever the zoning ordinance requires?
We certainly could. I don't know that it would be necessary because it just automatically would apply. I think also one thing to think about with this lot is because of its configuration, its odd shape, any commercial development on there is going to be not have a big impact, just simply because the shape of the lot, they're not going to be able to put a big building on there. It's going to be something relatively small, and so therefore couldn't have a huge impact.
Okay, that's all I had. Mr. Fell?
Another question. I realize that the map in the packet is not extremely accurate, but it looks like the house, if we annex it in, the rear setback, they're already over the rear setback. Do we need to note that?
No, we have that all over town, that properties were built before the current setbacks in different districts. If the house did burn down and it were rebuilt, they would have to meet the the setbacks for the district, even for a house, with the conditional use permit, and then if they couldn't, because the configuration of the lot, they would then need a
Right.
variance.
But even if it's non-conforming right now, we don't have to note that
No.
in the
No.
annexation?
Yeah,
agreement?
it's
Okay.
not necessary.
All right, thank you, Ms. Byrd. Petitioner can address the commission now? No? Yes? Please state your name and sign this sheet.
Tyler Rouse with First Federal Savings Bank.
Jason Iman with First Federal Savings Bank. Hello.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Whenever you're ready.
And I think Ms. Byrd basically touched on pretty much anything that we could possibly address. There's a couple points that she did touch on that I want to, I guess, after hearing the questions, I would like to say that it certainly is not our intent to put a multi-story building. We would like to maintain the structure as it currently is. We would just like to update it and make it possible for a small business. I see the potential of a dental office, something of that nature. Certainly not your high-rise scenario that, you know, multiple stories. So I wanted to kind of alleviate any concern that there may be in that regard. And
Yeah, at this time, we do not have any specific plans for the property as a commercial property. However, we do intend to use the existing structure and retrofit it into a type of an office building, like he said, like a dental office, perhaps an attorney's office, something along those lines. But we have no intentions of tearing the building down at this time and building a new structure in its place.
Thank you.
we just think, obviously, you know, with the surrounding commercial real estate, it's more suitable as with the potential of being a commercial building. Certainly, obviously, you can have it as a residential if you wanted to, which I think is the best of both worlds, and I think that that's even further validation that we have no intention of turning it into a multi-story commercial property.
What about the issue of the driveway and the fence? Would you guys have any objection to, you know, at the very least, you know, working with the adjacent owner to make sure that the driveway is not impeded, or even maybe adding that into the annexation agreement?
It'd be our intention to keep the fence on our property. I mean, you mentioned a
Sure.
concern about an RV.
I'm just not sure where the lot line is.
And
you
the
know.
lot line is 2 or 3 feet off the edge of the driveway,
Yeah.
I imagine, but at the same time, you mentioned the idea of an RV. I mean, I don't think any of us intentionally drive an RV into our neighbor's yard. I mean, so, I mean, we would have no intentions of impeding their way to their property, obviously, at all.
Mistake?
Did you say that you wouldn't mind having it stay residential?
We would be very much in favor of that, if, in addition to the option of marketing it as a commercial property. So, yeah, the way the ordinance is, the plan is written, it can be either residential or B1 commercial property.
So you could build what you wanted with the residential, in the residential?
I would defer to Mrs. Byrd on that, but I mean, yes. mean,
I think if I understand your question correctly, what they're simply wanting to sell the property, and they haven't been able to successfully sell it as a residence, as a house. And so they want to be able to market it as a house, which it is, but with the possibility that if someone wanted it for commercial development, that it had the zoning in place so that it could be developed commercially. I don't think they're intending to develop it. They're
Oh.
just trying to sell it.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
We don't intend to be the long-term property owner.
So you own it at this point?
Correct. We own it at this time. We've had it on the market for over a year, and we're just trying to increase the marketability of the property.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any
And
other
I would
questions?
also like to add real quick, and one of the major reasons that we, approach this possibility is because we've had numerous potential buyers who have called and asked what it was zoned, and we told them that it was currently zoned residential, and basically potential buyers have lost interest because of that. So we feel like that there's certainly marketability there in its current structure as a commercial property.
Great. Any further questions, or do you have any further commentary you'd like to share?
Not at this time.
All right, well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Any other proponents of this application wish to address the Plan Commission? No? Any one who is opposed to this or has concerns wish to address the Plan Commission? Please state your name and sign the sheet.
My name is Michelle Scott. I live at 2005 Willow Road.
All right, thank you.
I have some major concerns. I've been reading the businesses that could go on in that lot, and it'll impact maybe not that lot per se as much. I'm sorry, my not. Okay, thank you. It's going to impact Willow Road as a whole. It's going to increase the traffic on Willow Road. Right now, we're a shortcut for Cracker Barrel and Steak and Shake. Only 5 lots on Willow Road have a sidewalk. The rest is, you know, there's no sidewalks, so the cars, the pedestrians share the road. There are 2 school bus stops on that road. It's an oil and chip road, so additional traffic's going to mean additional wear and tear on that road. And there's no storm or sanitary, so if any more of that lot is made into a parking lot, that's going to be additional stormwater onto the road, which drains down usually towards Country Club Road. They were mentioning that who would want to buy a house on the interstate. There are houses on that frontage road. They have buffering plants in front of them, and they're fairly new built if you go to the west. Let's see. And I think this is going to directly affect the house to the south. With the fence, that there's no way the fence, any lighting around a business, there's no way to buffer from that. They already have it from Cracker Barrel, and you know, businesses like to light up their parking lots and whatnot. The current owner wishes to sell this. Why they don't want to tear it down, once they sell it, there's no telling what the new owners will want to do. And wouldn't the new owners still have to fix the problems with the house? If they use it as a business, they'd still have to fix the kitchen or the roof. And there's nothing stopping them from tearing it down, adhering to the, you know, conditions to rebuild. Also, as far as opportunities for businesses to go on that frontage lot, there's been an empty lot next to Steak and Shake for years once the Bombay Bicycle Club was tore down. I haven't seen that selling whatsoever, so if folks were real anxious to go out there, you would think you'd have had more interest in that area on that big empty lot. And finally, I would like Mr. Fitch to ask the bank a question. Has this lot been marketed with an MLS realtor? The only marketing I've seen is through the bank.
All right, I'll pass that on at the end.
Okay. And ultimately, it sounds to me like it's being rezoned so the bank could recoup money. And I don't think that's the purpose of the zoning board. I think we need to maintain the integrity of the neighborhood and the safety of the neighborhood. Another business that puts the lot south of there, well, they need a bigger lot, so they go for it to the lot south and try and buy that to make it a bigger lot, and that gets turned into business. And I think it just would be detrimental. So, thank you.
Do you have any question for Ms. Scott? No?
No.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Anyone else care to address this question? If you would just state your name and sign the sheet.
My name is Bruce Johnson. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sign this up. live on the other end of Willow Road. There were some good valid points that both sides made tonight. It sounds to me like they're wanting to change this, comes down to money. And they got behind a bad loan and they can't sell the house, and it'd be easier to sell that house or that property if it was zoned commercial. They haven't actively marketed that house, like the lady said. It hadn't been listed with the MLS. They had their own sign, like a for sale by owner, basically sign out front. It wasn't really pursued to try to get rid of it. And like anybody else, if you have to fix up your house to get rid of it, that's what you got to do. That's what I feel like the bank could do to help them get out from underneath their houses, fix it up, make it marketable, or at least put a roof on there, make it a little more curb appeal. And if anybody else puts anything on there, the footprint's going to be so small, it's going to be a real small business. And like the lady said before me, they're going to keep swallowing up the property. It's on a peninsula right now. It's got a little buffer zone between the residential and the commercial. This stuff that she was talking about north of the interstate, that's irrelevant. That's a whole nother place away. I mean, who cares what's on the other side of the highway? That's not concerning us people that live in the residential neighborhood down by this church or down Willow Road, which has been, I've lived there for over 35 years. And it's changed a lot. And here before we got annexed into the city, it was quiet. And then the city made us annex into there. They drug us in against our will. And they promised us, well, you'd have all this protection and you'd have fire and police. You know, I haven't seen a cop on that road since they annexed us in. And if you all come and sit in my driveway from 3 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you're going to see cars blazing up and down that road like it's a racetrack. And you can hear them singing on that rock. And it's crazy. These kids are going to get run over. There's no sidewalks on this road. And the last thing we need is more traffic. It's a tarmac road. It's mandated 25 miles an hour because it's not safe to go any faster. And I don't mind 25 or 30, but they're going up and down this road 40 and 50 miles an hour. Right in front of my house, there's 10 kids get off at a bus every day, these big yellow school buses. And they're really concerned about the safety for their kids. About 4 o'clock, them yellow school buses are blazing down the other way, going the other direction, just like everybody else. I've called the bus company. I've talked to some Urbana police officers. I see these new city buses. They just drug us in that road up and down Willow Road to the city buses. There's not even a bus stop on that road. I don't know why they're even on that road. It's cars park along it. It's down to one lane a lot. The last thing we need is more traffic on that road. And promoting a dental office or a lawyer office, when they sell that property, they're not going to have a dime in what goes in there afterwards. I mean, it's going to be whoever buys that property gets to put in whatever they want if it complies with the zoning. There's bushes right up and out of people's driveway, backed up to this road. So when you egress onto this road out of their driveways, sometimes you can't see. There's no buffer zone between, because there's no sidewalk. And if they come barreling down there 25 mile an hour, it's okay, but I'm sorry, at 40 or 50, it's not. And the concern is the traffic, along with us getting swallowed up by businesses, and there's going to be more traffic, and eventually our property values are going to diminish. You know, nobody's going to want to live next to a business with a bunch of lights and a bunch of traffic and door slamming. Who knows what's going to go in there and what kind of business hours they're going to have. This church, that's a resident. That's not a business. They're there one day a week. There's not a lot going on the rest of the time. It's not a hindrance at all. I'm sorry, I'm reading my notes.
It's okay.
Well, and there's another dozen people behind me that are pretty adamant about not letting this go further than a residential zoning like it is right now. And I think for the safety of the neighborhood, besides of our property values and you know, a lot of people that are here, we've been here 15, 20, 30 years at this properties. And I've been in Urbana since the middle 70s, and I think I'm going to stay here. But, you know, this big brother or government too much pushing it around because of the love of money, or, you know, nobody wanting to take it on the chin. You know, we take it on chin all the time. You know, look at the economy these days. You know, let's have a little reasoning here and consider us taxpayers that are having to live and reside at this particular area instead of somewhere else. You know. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Ms. Byrd?
If I could just address you for just 1 second,
Mr.
sir.
Johnson?
Sir? I just wanted to, not about the rezoning here, but, so you have reported the speeding to the police?
Yeah, I've talked to them. They sit into it used to be Sea Merchant, and I've talked to them about it, and they're like, they listen to me. They're not coy about it, but they're like, yeah, I believe you, you know. And they may be understaffed. They might not be able to find anybody to come down there and do it, but you can any of you guys are welcome to sit in my driveway from 3 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon and just watch the traffic. You don't need to be no cop or have no radar gun to know whether they're going 25 or 50. I mean, we all know if you're going 50 miles an hour, or if you're going 25. It's crazy what they're doing on this road.
Well, I'll pass along the comments and see if the police can.
Well, you're welcome
Another
to,
comment might help.
Yeah, you know, around 4 o'clock's a good time because the buses have already dropped off the kids and they haven't made their return ride yet. Them yellow buses are just as big perpetrators as anybody else. And the city buses, they just slow down a little bit. I've called them, and they kind of had their little bus police guys sitting there at Willow Court watching, but they get out of hand too. It depends on the driver. You do anybody else, or? Thank you.
I think we're good. Thank you. Anybody else?
My name is
State your
Allison.
name and sign the sheet.
Allison Colgrove, 1805 North Willow Road. And I'd like to talk about the traffic situation and the effect on the neighborhood as well. And I would ask that before you vote, you could come and actually see the street yourself, because it is not very wide, and without the sidewalks, with the cars parking on the street, any increase in traffic is going to have a huge effect. As it is, walking along the road, which many people do, if you come in on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, you'll see lots of dog walking, lots of families pushing their strollers, and other people out on the road without the sidewalks on the majority of the area, people parking in on the side of the street out of necessity. When cars are coming by at faster speeds, it's a really big problem. It's an unsafe situation. And adding to that is going to make it less safe. And even if they're not speeding, just the fact that there's increased car presence on the street is a big deal for us. I have 2 small children. I want to feel comfortable with them going out and riding their bikes, because adjacent to our road is a little bit less traffic, where it's a little bit safer for them to ride. But for them to get there, they're going to be on Willow Road. So I would appreciate it if you would keep the neighborhood residential, because we don't know what's coming next, like has been mentioned already. You know, is a parking lot going to go on the property? Is a multi-story building going to go on the property? You know, once you open that door, what's going to happen? We don't know. I don't know what B1 includes, and I'm going to trust that that means just a small business and nothing that's going to be very invasive.
Actually, there should be, if not on that back table, we could certainly get you, Ms. Byrd can get you a copy of the permitted uses in a B1 district.
That would be great. But so I wish that you would come for a field trip and look at the neighborhood before you vote. I would really appreciate that, so you can see the lack of sidewalks, so you can see the drainage ditches. You can't just step over into someone's lawn when a car is coming. You have to stand there on the side of the road as the car passes. Either that or you'll go right down into the ditch, you know? So take those things into account before you vote, please.
Any
you.
questions? Nope. Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else wish to air some concerns?
My name is Becky Hess, and I live at 1910 North Willow Road. The problem with the speeding on the road, 2 years ago, I believe, they put the drainage ditches in on both sides of our road because the road floods. At the top of the street, they took down the caution children playing sign. I called the city back and asked them, can you put it back to the same issue? There's many children on the streets, dogs, strollers, all that you've heard. The police department told me that they can't put it back up because we're in the city limits. On that sign, you know, was restricted, the 25 mile an hour. I even asked them if they could get the old one back out and just put it back up for all of our kids' safeties. At one point, there was probably 30 kids on the top half of that block. And just like everybody said, the kids getting off of the buses. I even asked the police department to sit out there and monitor, just like you've heard before. But this was 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. They didn't have enough man hours to sit somebody out there. That's what we were told. So the speeding just kept increasing, just like you've heard. That's the biggest problem, because we don't have the big street lights all the way down Willow Road. And you cannot see. You can't, and the little kids that are out, all the traffic that goes up and down that street, it's just a matter of time. And it's a matter of record, because I put it on there, and I've even asked them, this is an accident waiting to happen. That's what Willow Road. And it's going to be involved with somebody small, somebody's dog, a child, even an adult, because just like you've heard, 35, 40, 50, it doesn't matter how many times we call, they're not doing anything about it. Nothing at all. It's just unsafe. And another business in that area would just make it even unsafer, more unsafe, I should say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think we understand your concerns over the traffic, so if I could, yeah, okay, great, yeah. If you have something additional, that would be great.
Karen Ward, 2102 North Willow Road. And my concern is that I am the first house that is out through the county. I am not in city limits, which has been a detriment to some extent in terms of the new pool and other issues. You know, to be the first house, I am not on city sewage, and part of this concerns me because I've also got a neighbor that has not taken care of his yard for almost 2 years. And it makes it very hard for me to pull out of my driveway because there are weeds all the way to the road. You can't even see the front of his house anymore. He can barely get in his driveway. It's that bad. And I'm concerned that we have issues. I've called and tried to complain about his property, and it has not gotten me anywhere because I am not in the city limits. So I am concerned, being considered out of the city limits, that if we would have some issues, any more issues than what we have now, and again, the traffic and not being able to pull out. But if we have any other issues, is anyone going to take care of it? Is this house that's on that corner does not have city sewage, as far as I know. And if that's the case, how's that going to affect the other 4 houses that are on septic?
Well,
So that concerns me, if they're going to come in and say, okay, we're going to run lines and everybody's going to have to hook up. So that concerns me.
I don't 100% know the answer to your question. I don't think that we could require, city septic for an unincorporated. I do think, typically, if we annex somebody in, then we do run the lines. I don't know if in this case that would have to wait until any change to the building or what.
Well, that's the thing, is if
yeah.
they do commercial.
In that case, I'm almost certain we run
take it off as
yeah.
residential, then it's going to maybe force an issue at some
Probably
point.
for that one property. Now, for the other properties, I'm not an expert on this. I don't think it would have any effect. Ms. Bird may be able to.
So if that property did change use, so if it went into a commercial use, it would then come on the city's sewage, the sanitary district. That would not necessitate those other 4 properties coming on. The only requirement, if you had septic failure, then the line would be there for you to connect into. If I could ask a question though about so it's the property to the south that's in the city that has the overgrown yard?
It is, I am 2102, and it is to the north of me.
Okay, so it's also in the county. Yeah, so
Yes.
that's why the county does not enforce things in the same way that the city does.
Oh, I know.
Right. So, but you're adjacent to the city, and so you could annex into the city, and that would allow you access to the pool and the library, and then it would. There are other benefits, but of course, it wouldn't help with that property directly to the north, although it may help. There are ways that it could help. If you'd like to talk about it, you could always give me a call.
Okay.
Sometime.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have anything else? All right, I'm going to, one more.
My name is Ryan. My name is Ryan Levitas. I live at 1708 North Willow Road. So this is my first time addressing a board of any kind.
Well, thank you.
So if I'm nervous, please forgive me. We've already mentioned the traffic. I'll be very brief.
Yeah.
I'm one of the notorious dog walkers that you've heard so much about, and boy, people fly through there, 40 miles an hour. Okay, one thing I like about Urbana is that they do a good job, you guys do a good job of balancing different things. The petitioner and the people who are saying you shouldn't allow this zoning to take place. One word comes to mind when I think of putting a business there, and that's sprawl. Because a business moves in, and they think, boy, it'd really be nice to expand to the south. Maybe we could get that guy to sell his house to us. And then they knock it down, and you creep downward, and sooner or later, it's all business. So that's something that I don't want, and this seems like something that could lead to that. And so that's one reason I don't like it. The second is the petitioners aren't really invested in this, and I'll tell you why. Once they are able to sell this property, they'll be gone, and they'll wheel and deal in other areas of town and do very good things. But the people who live here, the people who are sitting behind me, will still be there, and they'll have to deal with the effects of this zoning for a longer period of time. So that's it. That's all I have to say.
Any questions? Thank you very much. You did a great job.
Thank you.
All right. If we don't have any other concerns, invite the petitioners back up to talk to us again, and to specifically, if you could just address the question of how you marketed the property. that was asked?
If I may, I'd like to touch on a few things. as
Oh,
well.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
First of all, it seems a majority, if not all, of the issues or concerns that have been raised seem to have nothing to do with zoning. A lot of it is speeding in the area, sidewalks, which that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with a zoning type issue. The previous gentleman made the comment that we don't necessarily have a vested interest in this. We're a community bank. We've been located in Champaign-Urbana since 1908. We have 3 branches specifically in this town. We have been offered to sell this property for a substantial discount. And we did not do that because we thought it was in the best interest of the neighborhood. We certainly could have sold it at a deep discount. Property values in the neighborhood would have gone down. And we just didn't think that that was the right thing to do.
As an example along those lines, the bank also owns a property at G.H. Baker, which is just around the corner from this particular property. And we have spent the summer, it was in very bad shape when we received the property back, and we have invested a significant amount of money. As the gentleman stated, I believe, that, you know, when you have a property that needs repairs, you fix it. I agree if the property deserves it in that regard. And there's a house around the corner that we have been spent this summer, and we're getting ready to market it. It'll go on the markets here within the next week or so. And it's a single-family house, and we believe we have significantly helped the property values of the immediate neighbors there with what we have done to this particular house on G.H. Baker. We do have a vested interest in this community. We have many customers that live in this neighborhood. It would be detrimental to the bank for us to see that neighborhood decline in any way. So that's why we're looking for not only the best interest of this property, but the property we're working with on G.H. Baker around the corner as well.
And I think that certainly contradicts any type of issue that has been raised that we don't have a vested interest, because that's not true at all.
Well, I believe you. Specifically, if you could address the question of have you listed it with an MLS Realtor, what's, you know?
It has not been listed with the MLS Realtor. However, we're a bank. We work with these people every day. We have had more inquiries on that property than other properties we've had back listed with realtors. We know the realtors. We work with them continuously. There are not very many realtors in this town that I imagine would not know that property is for sale, and we have not spoken to about it. The fact that it's not listed on MLS does not necessarily mean that it's not being marketed.
And I think the fact that we've received offers to purchase this real estate just further validates that the marketability has been there.
We've turned down at least 10 or so offers within the past 6 months that would have been detrimental to their property, in our opinion.
But if somebody did an internet search, for example, would they come up with this in a, you know, typical MLS listing?
It is not listed on MLS,
Yeah,
no.
Right, okay.
Typically, it is exposed in our branches and on our website.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Mr. Ash?
Yes, indeed. Several questions, gentlemen. You've purported to tell the commission that it's been well marketed. How much financially have you all invested in marketing the property?
I would not have a number for you on that.
How much on average do you all invest in marketing properties?
It certainly depends upon what type of property it is, whether it's listed on MLS.
Residential
whether it's not.
properties.
If it's a residential property listed on MLS, your real estate commissions that the realtors would have would vary between 3 and 6%.
Of the property value. And is it the norm to list
And
properties?
from that is not only, that's not necessarily their marketing cost. That would be their profit as well.
So it would, the price that would be marketed would include their overhead costs for
Correct.
selling the property as well. In the past, is it the bank's typical position to market properties on MLS?
If the situation is as such, sometimes, you know, we'll lose properties at sheriff's sale. Anybody can bid on properties, and we may not, you know, ever have an opportunity to do that. They may, once the bank gets title to it, they may call us on Monday and say, hey, I'd like to purchase this property. So it's difficult to say one way or the other. Each
It's a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. What made this case different?
We just feel like that it wasn't necessarily, it was not in very good condition. And as I said this earlier, we could have sold it at a deep discount, which would have significantly hurt the property values in that area. We just didn't think that was fair to the community, to the neighborhood, to anybody. And I think that if we just felt that there was more value there, as a potential commercial building, which is why we're here today, or the potential to maintain its residential state right now.
How do you, and I guess this will be my final question depending on your answer, how do you see the conversion of this property to B1 then impacting the residential property values? Because you said your stated goal is to save them from being driven down. How do you see this as protecting the landowner's property values?
In the write-up, there's a mention to the Patel Law Office, and I think property values, based upon their commercial nature, typically hold values that much better.
Well, for the residents, how do you see it affecting them? Because I know the Patel Law Office is located near Crystal Lake Park. There's several other businesses surrounding it. There's the Windy City across the street, and those characteristics are quite unlike the residential neighborhood. How do you see the conversion of the property in question impacting the property values of the residences around it? Will it be positive or will it be negative?
I think it'll be positive because it's surrounded by commercial real estate right now with Cracker Barrel, I mean, there's a hotel, there's a Steak and Shake, it's.
In your commercial
essentially
property,
the
if they're
same
going to come in and put in commercial property, they're going to have an invested interest in the property themselves. And it's going to take a significant upgrade on their part, a monetary influx into the property, which would not be there if it was sold at a deep discount and turned into a rental property.
Right. So, and so what you're saying, that the investment in the business property on the corner, that would not drive residential prices down. Is that what you're saying?
That is our belief.
Okay, very good. And in the past, has that been the case in your experience?
I have not experienced it.
We've never had a situation like this, so I can't speak to
So
it.
we
It's a very unique property. It's literally on the frontage road. The focus is on Willow. The house is more, I mean, it's off on the frontage road. I mean, it's a corner lot. I mean, it's a frontage road between businesses on the interstate.
So you can't say with any certainty that their property values won't be negatively impacted.
I'm not certain of anything.
Thank you, gentlemen.
At this point, in anything.
Brady. Well, I just like to start from the beginning. Residential property, it seems to me that when people have residential property, they don't want you to bring business into your property.
Are you gonna ask
They
a
want to
question?
live there and have a good place to live.
Are we going to ask a question, Ms. Stake?
Are we going to
Questions
ask, do
now?
I have
Yeah.
to ask questions?
Yeah, you
Okay.
can do the discussion later.
Oh,
Bring
I
up your
see, I
points.
can do the discussion
Yeah,
later.
when we get to discuss it.
Well, why didn't you think about this? About what it would do to the people who live there? And why didn't you think about how much their property probably would go back rather than forward? Why didn't you think about that?
I think we did think about that, and I don't think that that's the case. That's my belief. I don't think that the neighborhood would necessarily be harmed to the extent that you may think.
You think that people would still like to have more business there than to have another house there?
Perhaps.
And it would maintain its current structure.
You
is our-
think that? I don't. As far as I would be concerned, I wouldn't, but you think that that's what that would happen?
Yeah, that's what they said.
I think you
That's-
have to think about what the
This is
people there
questions,
would think.
Ms. Stake.
And I think that's important. So, you could ask those questions. I'll ask that question.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I think, unless you've got something else for us, I'm sorry. Ms. Bynum.
Just regarding the MLS, what would be, or are there any harms to listing the property on MLS?
Typically, you have to pay a real estate agent and a few other things. And to be honest with you, right now, we don't think that it's an MLS marketable property in its current state.
Okay, because of the current condition?
Right.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I believe I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this, and we'll turn it now over for a plan commission discussion. Does anybody have any thoughts regarding to what we've heard? Mr. Fell.
I have two questions for staff. If this property, if we annex it in as a B1 use, conditional use for R1, and somebody wants to convert it to a business use, is it still non-conforming? I mean, does it come in as a business use so they don't have to meet accessibility codes, or anything else? Because if it's already a business use and you put another business in it, you don't have to bring it up to current code. So are we bringing this in as a business or a
No.
residential use?
No, it would be a residential use.
So
but
if it's
with-
changed to a business use, even if they keep the structure, they have to bring it up to current building code for a business use?
Correct.
Okay. Other question is, I'm admittedly not up to par maybe on county zoning, but why didn't they just go to the county and ask them to rezone it and not annex it in?
Because it's adjacent to the city, so any development, a change of use on the property would require an annexation agreement. It's an intergovernmental agreement that we have with the sanitary district. A change of use in the ETJ, in the mile and a half, the extraterritorial jurisdiction, would require an annexation agreement. So they would have to come into the city anyway.
Okay. I think I'll have one more follow-up question. If we annex this in, do we now have by rights the ability to annex in the 4 lots south of this because we're surrounding them on 3 sides?
You have to surround on all 4 sides.
Okay.
Am I correct that the 4 property owners could petition, or what are the rules on that? Or if 3 of the 4 want it and the 4th doesn't, can they still petition?
So each of those property owners south of the subject property is adjacent to the city. Each of them is adjacent actually on 2 sides, but you only need to be adjacent on 1 side to annex into the city. So you just need to be contiguous with city boundaries.
I guess what I'm asking is, and this is kind of not material to this case, but if there's 1 irresponsible property owner and 3 responsible property owners, and they want to petition all 4 properties in, is that feasible? Because I know there's an election process that happens.
So they could, a little bit interesting, but we don't have addresses on the map. If you turn, well, I can show it on this map over here. There are 2 ways that could actually force annexation, and I'm not saying that the city would do this. But so. There's that noise. Yeah.
Your actual size control 1 should give it to you.
Sorry, do what? Control?
size.
Actual size, it may just give you the regular.
Okay, there we go. So if this property right here, can you see my mouse there? Yeah, so if this property were to annex, these properties would be wholly surrounded and the city could force annexation by state law. This property, if this property were to annex, I'm not sure if that kitty corner, I think it would though. I think that would also make these properties completely surrounded, and therefore the city
think you're
could
right.
as well force annexation. So, and that is under a state law that if properties are wholly surrounded and less than a certain size, which I think is 60 acres, a municipality has the right to annex. This one here? Yes. Right. Yeah, because this way as well. Right.
Thank you for that. And that's a little off topic, but I think hopefully it's helpful to know what your options are. So, okay, further discussion on this case. Ms. Stake.
Well, I still think that we're not thinking about residential people. I think when I have a residential area that I want to live in, I don't want somebody to come and say that they're going to have business in it. And especially to change it from what it was, residential, to business. So I think it's just absolutely so unfair to people who live in their homes and think they're going to stay there as a residential, and then somebody comes along and says that it would give them more money if they put it to business, is really so unfair. It's and that's
please.
That's just not being fair to people. No matter where we are in this area, in Urbana, when you have chosen a place to live and it's residential, you don't want business right next door. Nobody does. I don't think there are very many people who like business right next door to them. And I don't know how you got Cracker in there, but anyhow, I think we have to be concerned about how people are living, and if they liked it all, if they all said out here that they really are happy to have business next door, well, then I think that might be reasonable. But when the people out here are saying, we don't want the business, they can go someplace else and get business, but they can't get a nicer place by having business right next door. So I just don't think it's fair to even think about it.
Anything else, Ms. Tate?
No.
Mr. Ash? Ms. Bynum?
I was wondering if there is any cost analysis to see, if that property that we're discussing right now, if they're not able to sell it, because of its current condition and it just sits there vacant, would that be more detrimental to the surrounding properties as opposed to having maybe a viable small business there?
I think we have a difference of opinion on that among the people who have testified. And the bank thinks that it wouldn't have a detrimental effect, and it would be positive for the area to have the option of going commercial. The residents have spoken otherwise. So we have an honest difference of opinion on that, I think. It's a good question.
Well,
Mistake.
Well, aren't the people who have the property maybe should build it up so that it is a nice place to sell? Some place where people would want to live in it. Sounds like the house is not so good after all. So if they just clean it up probably and make it look like a place to live, then some families might like to move in. But it's very hard for people to move into a place that's torn down or not very nice. That I can easily see why they wouldn't sell it if it's not taken care of. But that's their fault. That's not the people out here. That's not their fault. That's not their fault at all. It's whoever owns the property. It's not the people who live around it.
Yeah, I think
so. We're blaming the people who are. We're blaming the wrong people.
I don't think we're blaming anybody. I think that the house is foreclosed on, the bank has it, and they've made a business decision that if they did invest in it and rehabilitate it as a house, they wouldn't be able to sell it, and therefore would lose their investment. That's what the testimony is.
They'll have plenty of money, I'm sure.
That's probably not part of this case.
It probably isn't.
Yeah.
But it's true.
I do,
Mr. Ash.
and I will be brief. I will not hold us long. I do think there is something to be said that there is speculation on what will happen in the end, and I know that's not of the concern of the commission. We're not soothsayers. I do foresee that, but I do recognize that I do have a sense of hesitancy about this. I mean, I did ask very pointed questions about projections, and the answer was very plain that we don't know. And so for that reason, I am skeptical. I do recognize the importance of the bank in making a profit. They must keep their doors open. But I am very hard-pressed. I was not completely satisfied with the answers on some questions that were very important to me in terms of weighing this matter. appropriately. So I will say that much for it. But I do thank both sides of this story for being here, both the public and the bank as well, because what I've at least gotten a chance to see is that honest discussion that you just mentioned. And it is very tough to call on this one because you have to balance the interests of the city versus the interests of its citizens. And that is always a very hard line to draw.
Good points. If you're through, I've got a couple thoughts. We recently had a case, a very difficult case. These are always difficult cases when you're talking of a rezone to commercial in a residential area, especially when the adjacent residents are opposed, as Ms. Stake pointed out. If they're okay with it, it makes the decision a lot easier. In that case, in which the commission voted to recommend approval of the rezone to commercial, the key point on which we did that was that the comprehensive plan called for it. And in order to protect the integrity of a comprehensive plan, we followed it. And I'm looking at the comprehensive land use map, Exhibit C, in the packet. And the subject property is on the future land use map residential. So in order to, I can understand both sides, I really can. But to stick with precedent, I'm going to follow the comprehensive plan. So are we, in other words, residential is what it says, and I think that's what it should stay.
I'll
Mr. Bell.
follow that up in a way with the same case. The petitioner in that case, I think, made the same point the petitioner in this case is making, that if it was a viable residential property, someone would have acquired it for residential property. And so I think I don't disagree with you, but I think this is kind of the same. It's a piece of property that's just in an unfortunate location that makes it less desirable to be a residential property. But we probably do need to follow the comprehensive plan, because that's, I think, within reason, what every resident can look at as what our future outlook for the city is.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think this is a very similar case, even though this is not a city block, it's one piece of property, but I think it's the same conditions, and I think it deserves the same result.
Well, your point about it is possibly being unsellable as residential, I think, is the point the bank has come to. And I did visit the neighborhood and drive up and down the street, and it's a hard sell. I mean, there's no question about it. Your interest rate's in the front yard, you know. So it's a tough call, but following the plan, I think, is the right way to go. So I don't know if we're ready for any motions or further discussion. So our options in this case are to approve or recommend approval of the staff's recommendation to support the rezoning, to recommend for approval with changes, or to recommend denial of the proposal.
I would like to move that we deny.
Okay, you want to put that in motion for him?
Yeah.
Before you
Yeah.
do that, Ms. Byrd?
Clarify that the options are to recommend approval of the annexation agreement with the recommended zoning change
Mhm.
to B1, or recommend approval of the proposed annexation agreement with a change, which could be removing that change in zoning, or to deny, or to recommend denial of the annexation agreement. So if you want to recommend denial of the agreement, that's one option, but you also have the option of recommending approval of the agreement so that they could annex into the city if they wanted to, but without the zoning change.
Mm-hmm.
And that one would take the agreement to the property owner.
I hadn't read that way. That's very interesting.
If we do that, does the petitioner have the option to go to the zoning board and get the property rezoned?
rezonings come to this body.
So, all right. So even
No.
if we annex it in, they could then petition to rezone the property.
Any citizen of Urbana
Right.
could petition to rezone their property.
Okay.
If we annexed it without the zoning, would the city run the sewer lines, and would that make it any more marketable?
So the agreement with the sanitary district is that when there is a change of use or
So it'd still have to be a
new
change of use.
construction,
Yeah.
or new construction, so if they were to rehab the existing building, that would not cause a need to hook up to sanitary. They would have the option
They could
of
do it.
doing that if they wanted and if it was available.
Mhm.
But it would not be an automatically triggered response unless they changed the use or there was new construction.
Okay. Okay. This is a, this is not germane to the case. Mr. Ash is going to have to leave shortly after the vote,
Indeed,
so.
there's an emergency that I must take care of.
Yeah, okay, well, I think I know what we should do, but we still need a motion.
It is in order, Mr. Chairman.
It is.
I would move that we recommend the approval of the annexation agreement without the change in the zoning regulation and send that motion to the city council favorably.
Is there a second? I'll second that. Motion by Mr. Ash, seconded by Mr. Fell to approve the annexation agreement without the rezoning. Discussion on that motion?
What does it mean then? Does it mean that then they could change it again?
It would mean, is my understanding, that we would not be changing it to business. It will remain residential, but they
Ew.
could then come again to the commission, any citizen could, as I understand it, to then ask again that it be changed to business. So this motion would maintain its current status as residential. It would not change it to business.
But they'd still come in?
They could come in again and
To
ask
us.
us. They would have to ask us again for permission to change it to business. So what the motion does right now is it keeps it residential. If they would want to change it to business in the future, they'd have to come back and see us again.
But it would become
Well-
part of the city, and they could hook up to the city's
Indeed.
But they could.
sanitation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it gives them that benefit to be able to hook up to the sewer line.
Okay. Well, I don't know how to vote on that.
Indeed.
I really don't.
Ms. Byrd?
That would require agreement by the property owner. So you
Correct.
would need to ask the
Correct.
property owner.
All right. I think we're ready for a roll call vote. Ms. Andel?
Mr. Fell,
Yes.
Mr. Fitch,
Yes.
Ms. Stake,
No.
She said no.
I said
Mr.
no.
Ash,
Yes.
and Ms. Bindle.
Yes.
Zero. Oh, they usually get what they want.
Brenda Dean.
They do.
That's it. The motion passes 4-1, and we'll go to the city council.
We'll talk to the property owner and see if they want to pursue the annexation agreement without the rezoning.
Okay. Further discussion required. All right. This plan case is closed. We're now going to move, we don't have any new business. Do we have any audience participation? Does anybody want to address the commission for 5 minutes on a topic unrelated to that case?
So I don't write my name on this because I'm not on the hearing, right?
No, go ahead and put that on there so we can Ms. McCusick, we know who you are, but if you could put it on there so that we can make sure we get it into the minutes. And since we're pretty late here and we've got a study session after this, I'm going to limit you to 5 minutes.
I'm criticizing the Plan Commission on these dimensions
for sending on to September 3rd, 2013 City Council from its August 22nd, 2013 meeting, the plan case 2208 T13, which was the multi-part.
Would you mind speaking up just a bit?
I am criticizing the Plan Commission on these dimensions for the sending on to September 3rd, 2013 City Council from its August 22nd, 2013 meeting, the Plan Case 2208-T-13. That was the multi-part text amendment that was going to entail the zoning ordinance republication. For these reasons, Plan Commission new council would not have the approved minutes when it would have the plan case before it as an ordinance, as a proposed ordinance. Well, Plan Commission did not actually know at the time of the vote, because you took the vote on sending it on to council, and then the chair asked Robert Myers, when will this go to council? And it was just basically the following Monday. So obviously, Plan hadn't ascertained that it was going to have a chance to approve its own minutes before forwarding the case. And the draft minutes serve as the reasons for the determination, you know, or what the council has for the Plan Commission's thinking that was behind their approval. So that's number one. Number two was that the Plan Commission doesn't, I guess you never see the ordinance text, like at the point you're approving a plan case, and that was true in the case of the multi-part text amendment on August 22nd. You didn't have the ordinance yet. That would be something that the staff memo for the council had. The Plan Commission didn't complain about the staff memorandum's typeface, and it was really hard to read. And so it's my interpretation that that's part of the reason that the Plan Commissioners appeared to be relying on the oral presentation of the staff instead of trying to read along. And the problem with that was that the staff person wasn't trying to be totally thorough. He said he was just hitting the highlights of the multi-part text, you know, of the different changes. That was Jeff Engstrom. So, okay, number 4 was that the Plan Commission instructed Jeff to work up some changes, but they were never going to be able to see it before it went on to council. They were just sort of describing it in general, the changes, and Jeff was going to work it up before taking it to council. So it can't be accountable for that, you know. It doesn't check its work. Plan Commission doesn't, you know. And number 5 would be that the Plan Commission relied on the staff idea about publication, and I think relied on some incorrect information, because the staff was saying to August 22nd that the publication had been yearly, but I bought this zoning ordinance that was for sale at the clerk's office before it was a new one that came out of as a result of the City Council hearing this on September 3rd. I mean, well, they passed it September 16th. So this one has, on the inside, it has the previous publication dates, and it was not annually it was erratic, but it was less often than annually. So it was maybe like an intention to go to.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, Ms. McCusick.
Did want to ask one question about if it would be appropriate, what qualifies as old business? Because I think it's pretty significant issues that are involved in this, and I wondered is there any chance that the multi-part text amendment or that plan case could be discussed under an old business on a future agenda?
No, we closed that case.
What is old business?
Something that's not a continued public hearing that we want to take up again. And you know what? I don't think that we've had any old business since I've been on this commission in 6 years, so I don't have a good example.
Okay.
Thank you.
I marked it as audience participation, so it won't get.
Okay, thank you. We'll note that in a minute. Any other audience participation? And again, I'm going to have to limit you to 5 minutes because we've got another study session.
Dave Monk, I can come back again. It's the 100th anniversary of planning and a few other things like that. I'm concerned about the railroad. You've acquired the trail on interim trail use. IDOT is going parallel to open up to St. Joe. So that means moving the fiber optics cables. It means adjacency to the rail trail. The rail trail includes prairie, often invaded by trees, so eventually we hope the trees will be removed. But you start at Dobbins Drive and you go to Hillary. And although this is outside your jurisdiction, Champaign is flat, and most of your terrain is in Piatt or DeWitt or Vermilion County. So I'm looking for some dialogue between local park districts, forest preserves, and conservation districts to care for the adjacency of the railroad. It's not the world's greatest prairie. We don't have any world's greatest prairie. But the soil is relatively untouched, and I would like to see the species, the soil preserved and the species preserved. And certainly I don't want the Department of Transportation to be planting invasive roadside species that grow in 10 days but cost thousands and thousands of dollars to remove. So that's the crux of my concern, is that you be concerned about that corridor to Danville. It's a Kickapoo Trail. It's outside your jurisdiction, but trails are getting to be extremely popular, and they ask you to go outside your box. So I'll come back again.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
We're still going to talk about it, right?
We'll have the study session on the Trailways plan. Yeah.
Oh, you have it?
We will. He's going to be
now.
right on after this.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. What?
Champaign County Greenways and Trails Plan 2013. And this is just going to be a presentation. There's not going to be any action.
Okay.
It's just a presentation.
I'll stay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
He knows more about rails and trails than
I know.
I mean, he knows everything. He knows every.
All right.
Every
All right.
plan and every.
Study session.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Gabe Lewis. I'm a transportation planner with the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission, and we are staffing the update of the existing Champaign County Greenways and Trails plan. The plan, the last plan was approved in 2004, so we're coming up on about 10 years since it's been updated. Just to give you some information, historic background, there's been a lot of greenways and trails planning for decades in Champaign County going back to the 1930s. We had a plan in place in 1999 and 2004, and since the 2004 plan, there's been a technical and policy committee that was formed, and RPC staff has done some implementation products from that were recommended in the previous plan, and now we're incorporating these into the plan update. So as I mentioned, the two policy committees, we have representatives from many agencies, not only the City of Urbana and Champaign, but the University of Illinois, the park districts, the forest preserve districts, Champaign County, and some of our smaller villages, Mahomet, Savoy, St. Joseph is new to the process, and Rantoul still in the process a little bit. This plan update's being funded by the Illinois Department of Transportation, and we're also working with the State Department of Natural Resources. So the focus of this plan update is on active transportation, which is any self-propelled, human-powered mode of transportation, mainly walking and biking. We're looking at hard surface trails that are at least 8 feet in width, and on-street bikeways that would include bike lanes and signed bike routes. And we're also looking at the environmental side of things, so looking at greenways, which are open spaces that include public parks, forest preserves, and some privately held spaces. We conducted a literature review of all the plans, active transportation and greenway plans completed since our 2004 plan, and that ended up being about 40 local documents and then 5 documents at the state level. So we also looked at the existing conditions of greenways and also mentioned recreational and athletic facilities. We have an inventory of that for each of the geographic areas in our county. And just to give you a status of where things are, we've seen an increase of 52 acres in the county of public greenways, so almost a 3% increase in greenways. And then we also have an inventory of our trails and bikeways. We want to make that clear that when we're talking about all of the paths that we are including the off-street and on-street, so that's why we use trails and bikeways, those terms. Again, for different areas, we have the inventories listed. And then we have some of these broken out where we have the changes from 2004 to 12. And we've seen about an 80% increase in hard off-street trails and 122% increase in bike lanes. And also a decrease in some of the bike paths that are on the campus, as those are narrow and outdated, and the university is trying to phase some of those out. And then looking at existing environment conditions, we've just noted that there are many scenic, biological rich areas that are preserved in the county, and our air quality and topography support trails. So, with the existing conditions inventory in place, we've looked at some of the issues and forces that affect trail development, bikeway development, and we've grouped most of these issues into 3 categories: accessibility, connectivity, and safety. So with that, we developed a needs assessment looking at connectivity of both greenways and trails, and found through our methodology that about 45% of households in the county have access to walking trails in terms of shared use paths, not including sidewalks. And then 69% have access to biking trails when you count that people can bike faster than walking so they can get a further distance to a trail. And then for greenways, we're looking at a 72% of households having walking access to public greenways and 90% having biking access. So access is pretty good in both the urban and rural areas to greenways. The next element of the plan that we're looking at are the goals and objectives. We first did a status report on our existing goals and objectives, and out of the 28 objectives we have, we found that 20 are met or in progress, leaving just 8 unmet. So we're doing pretty good there. Want to keep that progress up. And then for our new goals and objectives, we are basing them off of the existing ones. We have incorporated member agency comments, including City of Urbana. And something that we're doing is making our objectives SMART, which I'll explain in the next slide, and creating performance measures. So SMART is an acronym from the Federal Highway Administration that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. So we're trying to create objectives that reflect that so that we are more specific with what we're talking about when we're trying to achieve something, that we can point to it and see, if we, in 5 years down the line, have we achieved this objective? We have something more quantifiable instead of just a vague statement. Performance measures are just a type of measure that we can use to see if we've met the objective or not. So with those products done, we came to the public with our first series of workshops. These were held last November. We had about 50 people attend overall. We tried to reach out to multiple parts of the county, being in Champaign-Urbana, Mahomet, and St. Joseph. And we had presentations and group mapping exercises. And then from there, we started working on some of the future conditions of this plan. So between the 2004 plan and now, one thing we've approved, the committee, Greenways and Trails committees have approved our design guidelines, and that includes sections on off-street facilities, on-street facilities, connections, crossings, trailhead facilities, rest areas, and logos and signage to try to create a consistent signage throughout the county. So whether you're going from a city to park district path or university to city path, to try to have some consistent signage where people know that they're still on the same trail system. We're going to be incorporating that into this plan, updating those design elements as they meet federal best practices. And then the main part of the future conditions we have is the transportation section. So we've compiled all the trail and bikeway projects from the plans that were developed since 2004, the relevant plans, and that includes 22 agency plans, 3 draft plans, some grant applications, and the public input sessions, and some of our recommendations. Very few of our own recommendations solely, just mainly to connect certain logical connections between 2 paths. And then we have maps that we'll have in the plan for each area. So Champaign and Urbana, we've created 4 maps since the area is so big. We want people to be able to see different types of facilities that are recommended. Then the implementation section strengthens, we think, this future conditions section because we have project prioritization checklists, and the committee has 16 criteria that they've agreed upon that each trail or bikeway will be scored for, and the higher the score, the higher priority it will get for this plan. Member agencies may have their own higher priorities. One criteria is actually if this is a high priority for the member agency, they need to provide documentation. But that's kind of the point of this whole plan, is to put everything together and see what's important to everybody on the larger scale. And then with that, we also have developed a funding sources list, actually in 2008, that we're updating for this, that puts together state, federal, private, and nonprofit funding sources to try to implement some of these plans. City of Urbana has done a very good job of seeking or receiving some of these grants and implementing a lot of on-street bikeways in the city. In addition to the infrastructure recommendations, we also have some non-infrastructure recommendations under several categories, including policy, conservation, and maintenance. And then a lot of active transportation planning involves the 5 E's. So in addition to engineering, we have education, evaluation, enforcement, and encouragement.
Could I just ask a question? Who's the we?
The we.
Yeah, who are the people who are doing all this? Regional Planning Commission?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then we have we have a section on the future conditions for environment with the system of development as it relates to the built environment, natural environment, and public health, and then some mitigation measures that member agencies can use if they choose on elements that are described in the existing environment section. So we brought these elements, this information, to our second public workshop in April, and people were given comment cards to vote on their top 3 preferred trail and bikeway projects in each geographic area. And we took that and were able to compile those results and see what was most desired. Kickapoo Rail Trail was the #1 desired pathway, and even a rail trail continuing that west into Champaign and Mahomet was right behind that. We had a good amount of public input on that too, with about 35, 37 people between the open house and additional email and mail that was received. So currently we're approaching the end of this plan process. We're finalizing the draft plan. There will be a 30-day public comment period starting later this month, and that will be advertised. The document will be on our website here at ccrpc.org/greenways/documents.php, and we'll also be sharing that with the city and all the member agencies, and they can share that link with you guys. And then the Greenways and Trails Policy Committee will meet in December to approve the document. So I'm happy to take any questions.
And when will this be available? So maybe first of the year, public will be able to get copies?
For the final plan?
Yeah.
Yeah. The first of the year. Yeah. Because the contract we have with IDOT expires at the end of this year. So we do actually, I should take a step back. We'll be submitting the final plan to IDOT, and we'll need to make any changes that they may have. But early next year is when the final plan will be placed on our website, and we can share that with others. We usually charge maybe $1 for a printed copy or something like that if somebody wants a printed copy, but it'll be available.
Well, maybe we'll see if the city can acquire some on our behalf.
Oh,
and,
yeah, sure.
I don't have $1.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. Ms. Bird.
So we will actually be bringing this to this body for.
Oh, great.
So the earlier, the 2004 Greenways and Trails Plan is an element of our comprehensive plan, and so we will be asking for a text amendment to adopt the new plan as part of the comprehensive plan, as an element in the comprehensive plan. So, which is why we wanted to bring this to you now, so that I will forward you the information when the draft plan is available on their website for public comment. I'll forward you that link, and if you can take a look at the plan, provide any comments that pertain to Urbana to the Regional Planning Commission, so that they could take those changes into account before they create the final document, which will then come before you to adopt.
That's good to know. Thank you. Any further questions or comments?
Well, I'd just like to say I think it's great that you're doing this,
Thank you.
because we do need the rails and trails.
Yeah.
We need the rails.
Right,
We're not
exactly.
getting too many of those.
Yeah. Rails to trails or rails with trails, either way. Whatever we can do.
Well, I'm looking forward to digging into it more. So
Sure.
thank you.
Thanks.
I forgot to ask you if you had a staff report.
I do, just a short one. So
Thank you.
the case that came before you this evening, the annexation agreement, if that goes forward, it would go forward to the November 18th City Council meeting. The last case that you considered, the special use permit for the parking lot for St. Patrick's Church, was approved by the City Council. And as I believe most of you know, but just in case, our planning manager, Robert Myers, left the city for a new job in St. Charles County, Missouri. His last day was October 22nd. I've been appointed the interim planning manager. And I had one other thing to tell you.
Congratulations.
But I'm not sure what that is. Why, thank you.
Yeah.
I think.
All right.
Thank you. And I think that's it then.
All right. Well, we don't have any other items on the agenda, so we're adjourned. Thank you.